Welcome to Bell Brothers Brewing.
Engineers talking about beers.
I'm Curtis.
I'm Cody.
And today we're talking about science.
Malt science.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So grainy.
And seeing as we're engineers talking about beers, I figure we might as well drink some beers while we're talking malts.
And today we've got Red Leg's Wild Weasel Beer. IPA?
IPA.
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 Big shout out to Red Leg. Cody, tell me, what is malt?
It's a grain, specifically a barley.
Barley
a grain. Malt is barley that has been steeped and germinated and then kilned. And we'll get into what all that means later. You just need to know that it makes the malt capable of producing sugars that we can use to make beer. Curtis, how does it make sugar out of malt?
Well, it makes sugars using enzymatic activity, which is listed on the malts as diastatic power. And that brings me to what I would consider probably the most important distinguishing factor of malts. And that is the difference between your specialty malts and base malts. Base malts have the majority of your diastatic power required to bring those enzymes into play.
So that means I should just make a beer that's entirely base malt, right?
I guess you could, except it would be really dry and not really have much flavor, character, body. I mean, any number of different things. That's a great way to make hop water.
Or coarse.
Or coarse. So what happens is you get those enzymes, they start to create and convert those starches into sugars in that mashing process. What is your secondary, most important aspect of malts?
The colors and the flavors, because I like pretty things. And they can make pretty and tasty beer. The colors and the flavors of your malt are really important because that's how you give your beer life and vitality. Like we said, you can make a beer that is entirely base malt. It's actually pretty common. That being said, you're not going to make any of your mediums, your ambers, your darks, anything like that entirely out of base malt.
It won't one work. Hell of a boring beer.
Yep, very boring beer. So specialty malts are where you're going to get that color and your flavors. And your different specialty malts, you've got your caramel malts, or sometimes called crystal malts, if you're talking the UK, are your, well, caramely malts. They taste like various types of caramel. They work kind of like candy. If you start really light and barely toast them, they just taste like sugar a little bit. And as you slowly get darker and darker, you get into toffee and raisiny and really dark notes, all the way down into just tasting burnt.
So, do I have a base malt technically then that's at like 300 Lavbon? Like, is that a burnt malt that I can get as a base malt?
No. That would be impossible. Because as you heat it up like that, you kill the enzyme. Oh, not kill. You can't kill a thing that doesn't have life. When you heat it up that hot, the enzymes denature and therefore don't work, and you can't have a base malt without diastatic power. So if you heat it up that much, it stops working.
Well, I guess the most important aspect of these two pieces when you're really looking at your malts, right, is that you need good, solid, foundational base malts to bring in your diastatic power, to bring in those fermentable sugars, and to really kind of create that beer. But to make it interesting, to bring in your different styles, you've got to have specialty malts to get those flavors and those colors that we all know and love.
And they just really make it pop. That's really the fun part. And a lot of your more malty styles, it's really fun to play around with the malt bill for those. You can make some really interesting and fun things out of just a few different malts and a single hop.
And we eat with our eyes first, then our nose, then our
and then the finger.
Then the finger out of my. No, if you taste it, if you're touching your beer or your food, you're doing something wrong. No, you taste it. You taste it as your third one. You sicko. Yeah. No, so it's important that we really remember that what we're trying to do is serve a customer, right? You're trying to, whoever you're drinking your beer, I mean, for you, if you're just making beer for yourself, it can look like crap, right? That's fine. But personally, I like to share the beer, and the whole point, I think, is to share the experience.
And it's just so easy to drink a beer that looks nice and clean. Hey, Curtis, I've heard there are 2 different types of malt. But you just gave me 2 different types, but they didn't sound like the 2 types I've heard of.
Then you're probably thinking about 6-row versus 2-row malts. Now, 6-row is an older form and has a higher diastatic power per kernel, effectively. And 6-row came about because way back in history, and we'll get into some more of that, you actually needed more diastatic power due to roasting, kilning, and process issues. You needed to really pump those up. And so 6-row, when you're really talking about a limited beer of base malts, you're talking about adjuncts and whatnot like that, then you're really going to pump up that 6-row. 2-row is the more traditional now because I think most recipes really kind of fall into that category.
Well, the other thing that really helps with 2-row is that 2-row has more sugar per weight. Part of having more diastatic power is you must have more enzymes. Enzymes have weight. So when you buy 100 pounds of 6-row and 100 pounds of 2-row, there's more potential alcohol in your 2-row than your 6-row. So that can be really important when you're talking about the economics of making beer, which if you're ever going to get to a big level is very important. You gotta look at those things.
I agree. Yeah, obviously I wouldn't want to have to buy, 2 or 3 times more 6-row malt just to get to the same sugar levels or the same base level, when I could just buy some 2-row and make an economical standard and moving forward on that.
So in summary, when you're looking at your 2-row versus your 6-row, 2-row has more potential alcohol content because it's got more sugars available, and 6-row has a much higher diastatic power, giving it less sugars available because there's more protein and less carbohydrate to work with.
And I think that leads us on to our next subject, adjunct brewing. Adjuncts are a list of different, not only grains, but also primarily, adjuncts. Adjuncts include rice, Belgian candies, and sugars, vegetables and fruit, and corn.
It is important when you're using adjuncts to have this, especially when you're talking about you're going to mash with the adjunct. Some of the sugars are less important. If you're just going to pour molasses into the boil, your mashing's done, your diastatic power's gone. It doesn't matter. But if you're going to mash your corn, you're going to mash your pumpkin, going to mash anything that is more starchy and not sweet in the first place, that extra diastatic power from a 6-row can really, really bring it up.
Well, we've worked with 6-row malt before when we were working on our American Light Lager. And in that, we use a lot of corn adjunct in our mash. And because corn brings in a lot of those starches, but zero diastatic power, right? When we move into the mash itself, the mash is the process of those enzymes converting the starches into sugars, in which the yeast are then going to turn into alcohol, or you're going to have leftover as, hopefully residual sweetness, if you're looking for that.
The simpler way to describe mashing is you put all your grains in a pot of medium warm water, about like you're giving them a nice hot tub. You put all your grains in the hot tub and let them get nice and juicy till you got some sugar water to work with.
So, Cody, I've got these adjuncts, and I've got our base malts and specialty malts. Is there something else I can put inside my mash to give us more character?
I've heard actors work well for that. They got lots of characters. No, the thing he's looking for there for real is other grains. You can use your rye, your wheat, oats are the main ones you would really put in there. Rice, but we covered that under adjuncts because it's not quite the same. And those are important because they can impart different flavors or different qualities. Oats and wheat can really enhance the body and give you a lot more protein in your beer. And wheat obviously gives a wheaty flavor. And oatmeal can sometimes give an oaty flavor, but not much.
You be really careful with that one.
It's really hard to get an oaty flavor out of oatmeal, oddly enough. You think that'd be easy?
If you drink an oatmeal stout and it actually tastes like oatmeal cookie of one form or another, those brewers know what the hell they're doing. Because it is way hard to get that oat flavor out of the oats without it coming out like oatmeal.
Yeah.
Like the mealy, kind of nasty, not good. So if you do taste that, especially with oats, mad props, make sure you tell that brewer.
And rye is the final one, and that can impart a little bit of spiciness almost to your beer, though it can also start to make your beer oily if you use a lot of it. So usually when people talk about using rye in a beer, I think it's 10 to 15% of your malt bill at most.
It's got to be pretty minimal. We've experimented with it a couple of times, and both times, 3 times I think we've done it. It's always come out kind of a slick, an oil slick on it, and it's not something visual, but when you put it on your palate, you can tell. Yep. There's no joke in there. So you gotta be really careful with that. But as an extra grain, it can impart some really interesting flavor and character to your beer.
A little bit of spice note that you can get out of a rye is distinct. I think that's really the best way to put it is there's no substitute for the right amount of rye in a beer. And
especially for the styles, for the right style.
So we've been talking about all this other stuff, but you may be asking yourself, well, how do I make malt? So Curtis, how do I make malt?
First you go to the ice cream shop, right? And you ask for the malted milkshake. And then they scoop out the malt, and they put that into the milkshake, and you have malt. All right, all kidding aside, malting is a process of, I guess, somewhat growth of your grain, your barley seeds in warm water. So you're going to take those barley seeds, you're going to put them into this lukewarm water, and they're going to start to sprout. What does that do for us?
Sprouting, or germination, which is the stage we're at in malting, is important because it helps develop the enzymes and begin to convert the starches into sugars inside your malt, because the malt is attempting to grow, and it wants to turn the starches into sugar to grow the little malt flower.
But we got to stop
barley
that,
plant.
right? But we got to stop that before it gets too far, right? And so once it starts to germinate, what the maltsters do is they stop it at that point, right? They dry it out, and we start to move into the kilning stage.
And kilning is when you start to toast your malt to various levels. And if you do a really low toast, that's your base malts, because that preserves your enzymatic activity. So you can't go above 160 degrees there without killing your enzymatic activity. And then you slowly build from there into your crystals and caramels. And you keep going and going and going until you're into your roasted malts, the real dark ones, 250 and above, that impart those dark chocolatey burnt coffee flavors. About 250 Lavabond, which is the scale that they measure how much color a malt will impart to your beer. And it's important to note that Lavabond and SRM are similar but not the same, because SRM relies on being able to refract the light through it, which you can't do through a solid object.
No, Lavabond is like the amount of roast you put on the grain, right? You can't shine the light through the grain. So it's the idea of, it's like a hint, kind of a wag of the thumb to say that it's going to impart this much. Again, it all depends on percentages, right? Because if I take 100% of 300 Lavabond grain and I put that into my beer, all of a sudden I'm going to have basically this pitch black beer.
With no sweetness, because you didn't put any base malt and there's no sugar.
Right.
And no alcohol, because there's nothing to ferment.
But then I could also add more water, and it would slowly get clearer and clearer and clearer, right? And so really, Lavabond as a measurement of what your beer is going to look like is a bad call. You shouldn't do that. It's about understanding kind of the amount of roast and the kilning process involved in your grain, and therefore the expected flavors, aromas, and visual that you're going to get in the final run.
So if my malt is little bitty seed plants with roots on them, where'd all the roots go?
I would assume that in the killing process, we just kind of burn them all off for the most part.
You'd be wrong. There's a whole other step in the malting process called deculming, where they knock off all the little roots.
Do they take it with a grain? It sounds like a comb. So you take a giant comb and rake it over the...
No, culm, C-U-L-M. That's what they refer to the root, because just calling it a root is too difficult. They had to make up a new word for it.
Well, because derooting doesn't sound very cool.
But they knock them all off. I'm assuming it's probably a barrel spinny sort of process kind of thing.
That would make sense.
It seems like that. And then they have to clean and sort, because apparently somehow throughout all of this, there still might be rocks in it by the time you get to this point. And if anyone's been to a homebrew store, that process don't work great, because I've had rocks in my malt by the time it gets to the homebrew store.
You got to keep an eye on that, especially when it goes through your mill,
Yep.
because that's no fun.
Yep. So occasionally the cleaning process doesn't do a job, and I get sticks and rocks in my malt.
That begs the question. Rocks obviously don't float, right? And so when you put it in the water and we're doing the malting process, how in the hell does a rock get in that? Did they dig way deep to scoop up off the bottom or something? What are you maltsters doing over there?
And why are there rocks in my malt? That has no diastatic power, but I paid for that rock.
Right. It's a weight.
Milling your malt is where you will grind the malt down, and the goal of the process is just going to crack the malt just a little bit to expose the inside to help the water and the enzymes move around freely, but to leave the husk in place to stop you from getting a stuck mash, because the husk helps form a filter that you're going to run your wort through at the end.
And so that little piece inside of the husk is a germinated seed. It's not quite the seed. What's the term on that one? It's an endosperm?
Grit.
Grits?
Grits. Yeah,
Grits.
It's a germinated endosperm that creates the grits.
And so breaking that, keeping those whole is not too bad, but really what you want, that perfect mill, would be in half or into thirds, really. You kind of want to break them up a little bit, and then have those husks stay in almost full contact around the outside of that, because that really helps, and we'll talk more about this in the mashing process, to keep your mash from getting stuck. And allowing a lot of those enzymatic activity to get really into those starches and sugars to start doing the conversions and the jobs we're looking for.
Because this is a chemical process, and chemical processes rely on surface area.
While we're going through this whole kilning stage and process, the malting practice, we've got what I would consider specialty malts. Things that are uniquely treated. Malts that are taken to another degree.
The specialist of specialty malts.
Boom. What the hell are those?
They're the specialist of specialty malts. I just said it. The ones he was referring to are your peated malts, your honey malts, your smoked malts, and your acidulated malt.
What the heck is Pete doing around in a malt? Like Peter, the repeater, he's running around, he's like touching the malts. Is he like breaking them in half or something? Is it...
Well, he's hungry. His parents won't feed him, so he's trying to take your malts. And after he's been fiddling with them all, we got to sell them as a subpar product.
Those are considered
the
peated malts. Pete done peated on them. Pete.
Actual peated malts are malts that have been smoked over a peat fire like you would for a lowland scotch, if you're into those disgusting things.
What? No, hell no. Lowland Scotch is the superior Scotch. Highland Scotch is those uppity-uppities that lack flavor and character and depth.
I'm sorry I don't like my drinks to taste like bog.
Wood tastes like campfire.
Bog.
But that malt actually brings around that same kind of character to your beer. It can. And we actually had one out of Smiling Toad. We were at Smiling Toad, and Fred brought us a peated beer, and it was specifically designed to taste like that Lowland Scotch. And let me tell you what, he succeeded. It was an incredible and very interesting taste of that beer.
And it is incredible to make that work, because most peated beers just taste like boggy butt water.
Yeah, in general, most research that we've seen, they come back and say, just don't use it.
Now we go into smoked malts. And smoked malts have a little more variety. That's any wood smoked malt, because obviously a peated malt and a smoked malt are somewhat similar because it's using peat smoke. But a smoked malt relies on all woods. And you've seen these in a lot of rock beers. If you've watched any of our rock beer reviews on this channel.
There's a whole series. Go check out smoked beers.
And those are pretty self-explanatory. You take the malt, you smoke it.
It's after it's been, well, not kilned, but like we do the malting process, right? The whole process,
It's after drying, but prior to kilning.
Right.
You smoke it.
And so you get that, and you get these like really cool smoked characteristics on there, and then they kiln them to get them darker or lighter, and then you get these flavors. So one of my personal favorite maltsters and brewers out of Germany, and one of the oldest Rauch beers basically to history at this point, creates a birch smoked malt that really is interesting in the process itself because they smoke the grains before they go into the malting process. So when you're sitting in that water, making that hot tub of happiness, not necessarily the mash, but you know, they're trying to get there. You get this like interesting, they're like sitting in smoked water, which is kind of cool. And the flavors are completely different.
Yeah, I have found that style does produce a more mellow smoke versus the in-your-face bacon beer that a more traditional smoked malt will usually produce. Then another interesting one is the honey malts. These are similar to a caramel malt, but there's some tweaking of the details to make it come out to taste a little more honey, and it produces a very much like honey-like flavor. It's a very interesting type of malt. It should be the same as all the others, but it tastes like honey without adding honey. It's an interesting thing to play with.
Well, I mean, we've used that a couple of times to enhance some of those tropical fruit flavors, the melons. When you're looking to bring like a kind of an organic sweetness that's not like processed sugar kind of sweetness, like caramels and toffees and whatnot, I think honey malts really kind of help to bring in that organic sweet flavor. On top of your honey malts, there is one other specialty malt that I'd like to point out, and that's acidulated malt. Now, that has an acid on the malt itself, kind of coated, if you'd think, like a candy. And the whole purpose of this is to allow you to adjust your pH. Now, what's the history behind wanting to have acidulated malt?
So acidulated malt exists, once again, because of the Germans. Because of the Reinheitsgebot.
Bless you.
You can't add anything to your beer other than yeast, water, hops, and malt. But you still have to do acid adjustments to make sure that your mash pH is proper. So you use acidulated malt. And it allows them to say that they only added malt just there to adjust your pH around so that you can hit your target pH to produce whatever beer you're going for.
And we'll talk more about why you want to pay attention to those pHs as we go into more of the mash characters. And we've talked about that in other videos, but we're really going to hit that on another science video coming up. So keep an eye open for that, but we'll go into those details later.
How much acidulated malt should you be using?
That really depends on the style, but yeah, not much. You're usually looking to drop your pH from 7-something into the 5s. It doesn't take a ton to do that. If you use too much, you get no mash.
Right.
You get starchy glue water that you cannot make a beer out of. We tried. It doesn't work.
You got to really watch out for that acidulated. A little bit goes a long ways. Too much one way or another, and you may as well just like dump it down the drain.
So unless you're making beer in Germany to sell, and you're specifically trying to sell it as a beer in Germany,
Probably better to just stick with,
just use some lactic acid and save yourself a whole lot of headache.
yeah, just do your water chemistry. And if you're interested about that, go check out our water chemistry video. It'll tell you all about that. So Cody, you've hinted at this a couple of times, the caramel versus crystal character. Why are we getting into that? What does that exist for?
That is mostly down to UK versus America. So if you're in America, you call it a caramel malt. If you're in the UK, you call it a crystal malt. Other than that, there's really no difference. This is just the locational differences. And there is something to be said for locational differences. You always got that terroir.
Which is kind of like that thumbprint, right? The kind of unique character that is given by the environment in which the grains are being grown.
Mm-hmm. One of our favorite ones that really shows this is using the Maris Otter. It's a specific barley strain, and it's a UK-specific strain. It gives you a really biscuity, bready sort of flavor, and it's really good for, unsurprisingly, making UK-style beers.
So the reason why you bring that up, right, is that it's based in the UK. It's got those kind of interesting characters to it. But if you were to utilize that Maris Otter in, say, an American lager, even though it's listed as a base malt, the kind of characters, flavors, and aromas that you're going to get is still just outside of that realm of what you're looking for. So you got to be really careful about where you're picking that, and pay attention, just like you do with your water chemistry, with the terroir of the grains that you're picking from that aspect of it.
Yep.
Now, if you're trying to use caramel versus crystal, as an American, you take the crystal and you dump it into the bay. Freedom!
So another interesting aspect of malting that we're going to go into here is history. Because, like anything with beer, there is a long and storied history to malting.
We've been brewing some form of alcohol probably since the beginning of mankind.
Probably before that. I mean, maybe not intentionally, but I'm sure somebody went and ate the banana that had been sitting on the ground a little too long.
Right? I mean, you can see that too. They've got macaques and monkeys and whatnot that all, even elephants. They've seen elephants go out when there's a whole bunch of like the fruit trees, drop a whole bunch of them, and the fruit trees start to like ferment.
They
or
wait a
whatever.
little while
yeah.
and they go and eat.
And then the elephants go and eat and they get drunk on the fermented fruit underneath the fruit trees.
A drunk elephant sounds like a scary prospect.
Yeah, they kind of like roll around with the legs sticking up.
It starts fermenting in their tummies and turns into a very potent brew. So on the way home, things start happening to them.
After that massive tangent,
So, Cody, what are the interesting aspects of malting that we've got in the historical reference?
so the big historical things are more historical solutions to malt not being what you needed.
So what you're saying is modern day problems are different than historical problems, and a lot of the history around malt is because science couldn't figure it out at the time?
Yeah, pretty much. Just like most other problems, we didn't have the science for it yet. Now we do. So you have things like decoction mashing, protein rests, and things like that that are historical solutions to under-modified malt. And when I say
Modified? What the hell are you talking about modified? Like, no. Aren't they supposed to be non-GMO, right? Non-GMO? Whatever they say on the Triscuit thing.
if you eaten it, it's GMO. Get over yourself. When we talk about modified in malting, you're talking about how much of the base starches are capable to be turned into sugars and how much enzymatic activity you have. And prior to modern malting practices, it was not uncommon for a malt to be less than 50% modified, at which point it would produce a subpar beer because you didn't have enough enzymes, you didn't have enough starches to really get your sugars going the right way.
And we don't have to deal with that now, right? Because most of the, well, I'd say almost all of the grains that you deal with, especially at a homebrew location, are already modified. Everything is taken care of. The maltsters have got this down finally. The science is good. And so a lot of these different historical pieces, the science that we're going to go talk about here in a second, isn't really necessary anymore.
Yeah.
And finally, we're going to talk about floor malting.
This is, so modern malting, when they go to actually malt the grain, they put it in big buckets and fill the bucket with water, bubble oxygen through it and let it sit, and then they take the water out and let it air dry. When you malted in a historical context, you had a big barn, you laid all of your malt out on the ground, sprinkled water over it, and then you put it in an 2-inch thick layer. Sprinkle your water over it, let it sit for a little while, rake it all out, rake it around, turn it over to make sure that everybody got air. Because this is a living process. To germinate your malt, it has to have air, it has to have water, it's got to live.
You're growing a seed.
Yeah, you're growing a seed. So they would rake it all out, spray it down with water, let it sit for a little while, rake it all out again, turn it over, spray it down with water, let it sit, rake it all out again, spray it down, let it sit. And over the course of a week or two, you would that's how you germinated your malt. Obviously, that's not how they do it anymore. Like I said, they put it in big buckets, they pump air through it, and it takes 3 days.
They've made it more efficient. They've made it more exact because they can actually track it. And obviously, it can be done faster, right? The efficiency aspect of that. So you're getting better, cleaner malts faster.
But as always, there's some hipster who thinks floor malting is better. So there are places now that do floor malting because hipsters, I don't know, they got to do it.
Well, homebrewers got a lot of time on their hands and a lot of cash in their pockets. And so it's nothing quite like a home brewer to request an expensive specialty malt for no reason other than bragging rights.
Yep. I need my artisanal floor malted Maris Otter because it's the only way I can make my super buttery IPA.
Right, but it can only be touched by CO2 across the board.
Yep.
Like oxygen after it's been malted,
There's
it's not unacceptable.
hot side oxygenation, man. It ruins beers. I can't have any oxygen in my beer before I put oxygen in it later. If you can't tell, we're making fun of people.
Honestly, I think that's most of the history that I have in malting itself.
I think we've fully covered the length and breadth of malting.
So hopefully this has been a rather interesting half an hour of us talking about malts. We hope you've enjoyed this, and if you're interested in other subjects, topics, or look out for our Bell Brothers University series where we're going to be doing really in-depth discussions on each one of these.
And on other brewing science topics, because we're going to go really in depth so that if you don't want to just know how to make a beer, but you want to know why beer, we're going to teach you.
And if you've enjoyed this, make sure you hit that like.
Make sure you subscribe.
And keep on visiting us here at Bell Brothers Brewing.
Engineers talking about beers.
Cheers. Rice, oats, rice, sugars, fruits, vegetables. Oh, vegetables was in
Fruit,
there.
veg, corn.
Fruit, veg,
You
corn.
should end on corn, because then you can make a course joke.
Right? Adjuncts include rice, sugars, Belgian candies, vegetables and fruit, and rice.
You've already said rice.
God damn it.
Rice?
Right, hold on.
oats.
Adjuncts.
And William Shatner loves him a Coors.
Obviously, he hasn't watched the newest video yet. Ethan watched the new video. Did you watch the new video?
Not yet.
No. So he doesn't know that the editing makes him look stupid.
Milling your malt is the process by which you fucking hell, I cannot put my goddamn train of thought together right now. Okay. Chug it, chug it, chug it, chug it. Chew, chew.
It's an adult channel. If you don't like it, suck my left nut.
Now, what's the brewery name?
Shinkurly. Shinkurly Malt. Shinkurly Brewery.
What?
You're going Swedish there. Swedish. You got the Swedish meatballs in the IKEA. I'm gonna go raid the UK. Take
right.
their women, pillage their turkeys. Okay, that should be a good half hour.